everyone, and welcome to your next language analysis practice lesson with me, Mrs. Brimming. So I am super excited today as we are going to be looking at some language from one of my very favourite books called Birdsong. So I can't wait to get started. Let's get your title and date down just like I've done and grab everything in that box and we can get going. Okay, so as usual, here is your 5 a day. I want 5 full sentences and I think all of you can reach that extension. So give yourself 5 minutes and 25 seconds. Off you go. Okay, and show me those green pens, please. And here are your answers to check and correct. Okay, the one I would like you to focus on that I think may have tricked some of you up would have been number 3. Okay, number 3, read the extract and consider the overall impression. Did you write down, read the question? Well, remember that is step 1. Okay, step 2 of language analysis is to read the extract. You've already read the question, that's step 1. So, can you check and correct your answers, please? And then when you're done, press play and we'll move on. So our objective for today then, well, we're going to do some more practice of language analysis because that's really important for your language exams. That we have lots of questions that require language analysis on your language exams, but also in your literature exams. So it's a skill that's kind of going to be really important for both of our English GCSEs. So we'll start with our retrieval practice. So 6 today, I reckon you're getting really, really good at this. So 35 seconds, write down 1 to 6, do that now. Okay, I'm done. So 35 seconds. Can you write down the correct terms? No need to pause. I will stay with you here. Go. Okay, that's half of your time. And 3, 2, 1, pens up, drop, green pens up. And here are your answers then. Please, can you tick them? If you got them right, well done. Did we get 6 out of 6? Correct any that you got wrong, and it would be a great idea to pause the video if there's any that you're really not sure of and you can write down the full definition. So our word of the week then for this week is autonomy. Okay, so autonomy, can you say it with me? Autonomy. Autonomy. So autonomy is the ability to make your own decisions without being controlled by anyone else. So can you get that definition down into your book and then we'll explain the word in some more detail. So, autonomy then is an abstract noun, okay? So it's a thing, but something that we can't see or taste or touch, so therefore it is an abstract noun. You can describe something as autonomous, so you might say that this person is autonomous, and that would therefore be an adjective. Or you can complete something in an autonomous way, so you would do it autonomously, which would make that an adverb. Now, the word root just down there is really interesting because it comes from the Greek, and auto means self. So when we think about something like automatic, okay, it moves on its own, doesn't it? Auto means self, or an autograph, or an autobiography. Okay, all of those things come from that Greek root word, which means self. And then we've got nomos, which means law. So if we put auto and nomos together, we've got autonomy. So it's like you govern yourself. You set kind of the laws of your own life, you kind of make yourself. So you govern yourself. Here it is in a sentence then. So, despite the witch's prophecies, Macbeth acts with autonomy. Despite the witch's prophecies, Macbeth acts with autonomy. Do you agree with that? Or is there a point in the play where Macbeth has no autonomy? Okay, do you think he's in control of his own actions and decisions? Do you think he has no autonomy? Well, it's debatable, isn't it? This is one of the great debates in Macbeth, okay? Who is in control? Is it Macbeth or is it the witches? Well, I would personally argue it's Macbeth because he didn't have to listen to the witches. Banquo got those predictions as well, and he didn't have to go off murdering the king to kind of get what he wanted. So I personally would argue that Macbeth has autonomy and he is in control of his actions the whole way through that play, and that's why he's punished so severely for it at the end. However, there are others who may disagree with me. I wonder if you are one of them. So it's similar autonomy to an old word of the week, okay? So it's similar to the word agency. So agency, remember, is your ability to act. And so they're both linked in the fact that they're both about being able to freely make decisions. However, there is a subtle difference between the two words. So autonomy is about how you make your own decisions, whereas agency is your ability to act. You can have agency without autonomy. So here is my example that I've written down for you. So follow along with me. Nicola Sturgeon has said she will hold a vote for Scottish independence without the permission of the UK government. She can act, but does not have the autonomy to declare independence. So Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish Parliament, wants independence for Scotland. Now, she says that she is going to hold a vote, so she has agency. However, she does not have autonomy because that final decision as to whether Scotland becomes independent or not does not really lie with her, or the ability to make that vote legal does not lie with her. So she has agency, but she does not have autonomy, because autonomy is about decisions and agency is about actions. So here are our 4 sentences for you to complete, please. Give yourself 4 minutes, any order you like, but make sure you are writing in full sentences. Press pause and then press play when you're done. So, how did you do? Well, who has the least autonomy in Inspector Calls? Well, that's Eva Smith, isn't it? Okay, she's not in control of lots of the things that happen to her. The suffragette movement fought for autonomy for women. Okay, so they fought for autonomy for women. Give yourself a tick if you got that one right. A point in the play where one may argue that Macbeth loses autonomy. Well, perhaps it's that scene of emasculation. Okay, so we might be talking about that. Potentially, you might be talking about the witch's prophecies. You may be talking about when he goes back to see the witches. Maybe in the banquet with the ghost. There's a few different areas you may be talking about. I'd love to see what you think. So upload your work to Padlet, and I will have a read. How much autonomy does a baby have? Well, not very much, really. Okay, a baby can't really make decisions for itself. It's completely kind of under the control of its parents or its carers. So fill in any of those that you didn't quite get and then press play when you are ready to move on. Okay, so here's a reminder then of our steps to success that you've seen for the last few weeks. So we're going to crack straight on with step number 1, which I'm going to show you the question, and we're going to write it down, and you're going to highlight the keywords for me, which I think you are going to be really good at by now. Here's your question then. Write it down and pause the video as you do that, and then highlight the keywords. Now remember, keywords is what your response should be specifically focused on. Okay, so think carefully about that as you are highlighting your keywords. Okay, so press pause and then press play when you are done. Okay, is this what we had highlighted? Experience of the soldiers. Now we know why. We know that how is not a keyword, is it? Because it's a command word, it's not a topic. We've gone over that a few times. We also know that writer is not the keyword because that also is not a topic. Language, which we've talked about before, it's not a keyword because it is something that you are being asked to write about, but it's not specifically what you're being asked to write about. So I wonder, though, if any of you did highlight just soldiers. And if you did, that's not quite right because we need the experience of the soldiers. Because imagine, what if the writing is talking about what a soldier looks like? That's not going to get us the marks because what we're trying to write about is the experience of the soldiers. So you would need the full 4 words highlighted, please. If you haven't done that, can you just correct it? And if you highlight any of the other words, can you make sure you track the reasons why they're not quite right? Okay, so Tick, we've done number 1. Fantastic. Now we're going to move on to number 2. So we're going to read the extract, think about the overall impression created by the language. So the extract we're going to read today then is from this book over here called Birdsong by Sebastian Volk. So this was written in the early 90s and it's a World War I story, but it also has a love story. So we've got this love story and then they're kind of torn apart by the war. And the particular extract that we're going to read from it describes this experience that I've got in the picture down here of going over the top. Okay, so the men were in their trenches, so you can kind of see their trenches here, and across on the other side of the field here, you would have had trenches from the opposing soldiers. And this area here, no man's land, so people, what they'd have to do is they'd go over the top of the trench, kind of walk across or run across no man's land, and then try and take the land and take the trench of the opposing army. Now, of course, that would have been absolutely terrifying, wouldn't it? Because what would the people in the other trench do? Well, they'd just be firing at you. They'd be bombing you, you can see here. So most people who went over the top and went into no man's land, they would have died, okay? Probably very, very quickly, really, because they would have just been kind of shot by the opposing army. So we're going to read an extract of that experience of a soldier going over the top, okay, during the Battle of the Somme. And really interestingly, it talks about the soldiers being asked to walk, okay, rather than run across no man's land. So just take a moment and think about that, okay? So you're having to, as a soldier in this trench, instead of having to run across no man's land to try and get to the other side, you have to walk. Why did they ask them to have to walk? Well, because they thought that if they ran, it would look like they were showing fear. Okay, so just think about that for a moment, how brave those men were and how that must have felt to go over the top of that trench and to walk slowly into the face of gunfire and bombs, and how awful that must have been for those men and the sacrifice that they made. Okay, so that's the extract that we're going to read today. Just before we get into the reading though, there's 2 words that I want to make sure we're all clear on. So I've got some images here. So the word khaki comes up. So khaki is the material, and that kind of brownish yellow material that the soldiers' uniforms would have been made of. So khaki is the kind of the colour and the fabric of that material. And then we also read about a cocoon. That's a butterfly there inside a cocoon. And that's what the insects make before they kind of become adults to kind of protect themselves as they grow into adults. So a caterpillar would go into a cocoon and then emerge a butterfly. Okay, let's read the extract. He walked hesitatingly forward, his skin tensed for the feeling of metal tearing flesh. He turned his body sideways, tenderly, to protect his eyes. He was hunched like an old woman in the cocoon of tearing noise. Byrne was walking beside him at the slow pace required by their orders. Stephen glanced to his right. He could see a long, wavering line of khaki, primitive dolls progressing in tense, deliberate steps, going down with a silent flap of arms, replaced, falling, continuing as though walking into a gale. He tried to catch Byrne's eye, but failed. The sound of machine guns was varied by the crack of snipers and the roar of the barrage ahead of them. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute now to read that by yourself. Any vocabulary that I think you might not understand is just in that box down there. So pause the video now for 1.5 minutes and reread that, please. Okay, so we know now, don't we, that the first thing that we have to do is to think about the overall impression. So, do we get a positive or negative impression of the experience of being a soldier from that extract? Okay, this one I think is probably fairly obvious. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? We get a negative impression of being a soldier. Okay, we already know going over the top would not have been a positive experience for those soldiers. So we know that it's negative. Now we're going to kind of drill down, look more closely at some of the language and how the writer is creating an effect. And we're going to be much more specific than just saying negative. So, can you please write down in your books, we do this every week, but so you can definitely get to 10 this week, 7 to 10 words or phrases that give you a negative impression of the experience of being a soldier. Pause the video and press play when you are done. Okay, and green pens ready then, please. here we go. So I've got loads of words here. You can add to your lists if you need to. All of these things are creating a negative impression of that experience of being a soldier going over the top. Okay, so let's drill down then, be much more specific with our word choices. So I've highlighted here metal, tearing flesh, falling, as though walking into a gale, machine guns, crack of snipers, and the roar of the barrage. Does that give the impression that the experience of being a soldier is dangerous, disgusting, or mournful? Mournful means sad. Okay, press pause and complete that sentence there with the correct word, please. And green pen's ready then for the correct word. It is, of course, dangerous, isn't it? Okay, so the tearing through the flesh, walking into a gale, that kind of strong storm, that would be very dangerous. We know machine guns are dangerous, snipers, the barrage, the kind of the bombs, etc., the heavy gunfire, and falling, also very dangerous. Okay, next group of words then. Hesitatingly, tensed, hunched like an old woman, wavering line of khaki, tense, walking into a gale, machine guns, crack snipers, roar of the barrage. Okay, this one, is this group of words, does it show that the experience of being a soldier is troubling, traumatic, or melancholy? Remember melancholy from a couple of lessons ago. Okay, melancholy, that feeling of sadness. Which one is it? Press pause, write the sentence out, and then press play. And green pen's at the ready. It's traumatic, isn't it? It's not troubling. Troubling is not a strong enough word for what's happening to these soldiers, okay? You're not troubled by people shooting at you, okay? It's much worse than that. Melancholy, again, you might be sad afterwards, but probably in the moment, he's not feeling very sad. He's probably feeling much more traumatized, okay? So traumatic is the correct word in that for that sentence there. And finally then, number 3, hunched like an old woman, primitive dolls, silent flap of arms, replaced and falling. Does that show that the experience of being a soldier is disempowering, nostalgic, or painful? Nostalgic, we know, don't we, from A Christmas Carol, okay? So that kind of painful feeling of longing and looking back. Okay, green pen's at the ready then. Did we get it? That's right, it is disempowering, okay? Disempowering. Okay, you're like an old woman, a doll, flapping of the arms, replace falling. Now, we know painful possibly with falling, but actually a lot of these aren't really linked with pain. Nostalgic, we know it's definitely not, because nostalgic is actually quite a nice feeling. It might be a bit painful, but it's not a bad feeling, you know, as in being in a war. I wouldn't necessarily say you'd be nostalgic for the feeling of a battle and this terrifying experience. Okay, so once you've got that correct, we are now ready to complete our sentence about the overall impression of the language. So this one here, please, can you pause your video and complete this sentence, which will become our point later in the lesson. And green pen's at the ready then. Here we go. So the language used by the writer depicts the experience of being a soldier as dangerous, traumatic, and disempowering. Okay, well done. We can now tick off our second step. So we've done number 1, we've done number 2. Let's move on to number 3. So we're now looking for the most striking and significant language choices that create this impression. So you know what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to spot some techniques and write them down for me. So today I'm looking for 2 similes, a metaphor, some onomatopoeia, in fact I think there's 2, and juxtaposition. So for the juxtaposition I'm looking for 2 contrasting semantic fields, okay? So there are 2 semantic fields in here that juxtapose each other. If you're not sure what any of these definitions mean, go back to your retrieval practice and you will find the definitions there. So press pause while you do that and we will go through them one by one afterwards. Okay, and green pen's at the ready again then, please. And here we go. So our 2 similes then. So we should have got hunched like an old woman in the cocoon of tearing noise and continuing as though walking into a gale. So we've got like and we've got as. Our metaphor then. Primitive dolls. So saying that the soldiers are dolls. Okay, we've got a metaphor there. The soldiers are not actually dolls. That's a metaphor. Number 3. Okay, the 2 onomatopoeias, we have crack, the crack of snipers, and we have roar, the roar of the barrage. And finally then, now this one was really tricky, so really well done if you got this one, okay? The juxtaposition. So the 2 contrasting semantic fields, we have a semantic field of vulnerability, which are describing the soldiers, so flesh, cocoon, tenderly, protect, hunched, dolls, the silent flap of arms, are showing how vulnerable the soldiers are. And then we have that juxtaposed with all of these words, mainly verbs, to do with brutality. So tearing, the crack of snipers, the roar of the barrage, the machine gun. So we've got this juxtaposition between the vulnerability of the soldiers and the brutality of war to emphasize just kind of what a dangerous situation the soldiers are in. So really well done if you got that one. That was tricky, and it's great they're able to kind of push to those higher levels now. So we now have 3 really striking pieces of language that we could choose to write about. And I got a really great question last week, after last week's lesson, where a student said to me, Mrs. Brimming, I found my 3 really striking pieces of language, but I'm in the exam and I'm under timed conditions. So how do I know which quotation is the best quotation to kind of enable me to show myself off as the best literary scholar that I can be? What a great question. That is a great question because that student is right. Choosing a quotation that's going to unlock the most meaning, choosing a metaphor that's going to unlock the most meaning really is an expert skill. But we're not all completely expert readers yet, and that's fine. So I'm going to talk you through the steps that you might take to choose that best quotation. So let me take you back to last week's lesson. So last week's lesson, we chose to write about quotation number 2 rather than quotation number 1 or number 3. And why did we do that? Well, because we felt that quotation number 2 was a much more powerful metaphor. So why? Well, let's think about what a metaphor is first. When a writer is using a metaphor, they're asking you to compare one thing with another. And what you have to do to unlock the meaning, you need to make the connection between the 2 things. So we have the rain and we have the hands of the wrinkled apes. What's the connection between rain and wrinkled apes? And we made that connection, didn't we, about nature and how it has the power to make humans regress into a more primitive state. And we made that connection, and so we unlocked the meaning the writer was intending behind that metaphor. So if you went on to university to study linguistics, you would learn that not all metaphors are equally powerful. And one of the things that makes a metaphor more or less powerful, or what they actually call the metaphoricity, is the connection between those 2 things you're being asked to compare and how close in meaning they are. So if we have quotation number 1, which was cut the trees like scissors, actually there is not a huge amount of difference in terms of meaning between rain and between scissors, because actually rain can cut through things, can't it? Okay, so if you held out a piece of paper in the rain, rain could potentially cut through that. However, the distance between rain and apes is quite big, isn't it? Okay, to make that leap between what is the connection between rain and between apes, that's a really big leap. And if you think about that from an examiner's point of view, the student who can make the connection between ape and rain is looking much deeper and therefore going to get much higher marks than the student who can make connection between rain and the scissors. Okay, so what we're looking for as an examiner, you're thinking about where's the student who can make the perceptive link. Okay, find the things that maybe lots of other students aren't really looking for, and that's it. So we're looking for the most powerful metaphor. What's the connection between rain and apes? That's quite difficult. So if you can find that, you can get yourself the most marks. Okay, you're going to climb up that ladder to the highest marks. So let's have a think about our quotations then. So we have the experience of a soldier compared with a gale, a storm. We have the experience of a soldier compared with a doll. And we have the experience of a soldier, and we hear the sound of the crack of the rifle. Now, which of these 3 things, okay, the sound, crack, a doll, or a storm, has the least obvious connection with the experience of a soldier at war? So I'm going to give you a bit of wait time. It's the doll, isn't it? Okay, a storm, I can think about a connection between war and a storm. Okay, dangerous, chaotic. Crack, definitely, I can hear a crack. But what is the link between a soldier and a doll, okay? So if we're looking at it like this, okay, we have that first one, that metaphorical language is quite powerful. There's a bit of distance between it, but not a huge amount. The second one, there is more distance between a soldier and a Gale, so we could get ourselves quite a lot of marks, but the biggest gain here, the highest leverage quotation, is going to be the soldiers being compared to dolls, because the student who can make that link is a really smart student. So let's check that understanding then with a show me. So which of these quotations has the greatest metaphoricity? Okay, which one are we going to choose to write about in our exams? So, ready? And 1, 2, show me. That is correct. It is number 2, okay? Number 2 is the one where we're really going to have to work and show the examiners how amazing we are to make that link back to soldiers. Okay, so we have now done step number 1, step number 2, and step number 3. We now need to explain how these choices create the impression of what the experience of a soldier is like. And we are going to do that with a little bit of help from my friend Finn here. Okay, so I have my doll here, and I need to start thinking about all of the things that I associate with a doll. So let's think about what I can do with this doll. So first of all, well, I can play with my doll, can't I? I can have lots of fun with my doll. I can think about maybe using my imagination. I can imagine that this doll is my friend. Maybe I can pretend to have a little tea party with my doll, and maybe create this little fantasy world with my doll. What else can I do with my doll? Well, I can make him do whatever I want to do, can't I? Look, I could make him do the splits if I wanted to. I could make him wave at you and say, hello students, or I can make him go down here. I can make him fly. Look, I can make him go over here. I can do whatever I want to do with my doll. I can manipulate my doll. And thinking back to our word of the week, what does that mean? It means that the doll has no, that's right, the doll has no autonomy. What else can I do with my doll? Well, actually, once I've had enough of my doll, I can just throw him away. Okay, a toy is something that is quite disposable. So I've come up with loads of different associations there with a doll. So I've got play, fun, imagination. It's not autonomous. I can manipulate him, and he's quite disposable. However, the question is about soldiers. So some of these connotations and associations aren't going to help me make the connection between the doll and between a soldier. Which ones do we think are? That's right, it's the bottom 3. So war definitely isn't a playful, fun place. It's not really a place where I can use my imagination, but I can make a link, a connection between a lack of autonomy, being manipulated, and being disposable. Have a think now, I'll give you a bit of wait time, about how that those connotations can link to war. So what did you think? Were you able to make that link, make that connection between a soldier and between a doll? Well, let's have a think about it. A soldier, just like a doll, is not really autonomous, okay? They are being controlled by other forces, okay? So it might be that they're being controlled by their commanding officer. So those soldiers going over the top were told to walk, not run, okay? They weren't able to make the decision. They weren't able to make the decision as to whether to go over the top or not. There are other forces, though, controlling soldiers. Forces such as patriotism, okay? That kind of feeling that you must fight for your country, that kind of controls them in a certain way. They're able to be manipulated. Well, yes, because soldiers are kind of forced into situations and told to do things made by propaganda or rhetoric into things that they wouldn't normally naturally do. And disposable? Well, yes, definitely. Okay, the men who went over the top, lots of people would argue that the kind of commanding officers saw them as disposable. Okay, if they weren't seen as disposable, would they have been asked to walk across that no man's land instead of run? So we're going to say bye to Finn for now. However, if you're a Year 11 student, keep a lookout for him in another one of your lessons today. So I think we have everything that we need now to start thinking about writing. And the first thing that I would like you to do is to draw this table out nice and straight with a ruler and to fill in just the connotation part. Now, we've just been through the connotations of dolls, so you should be able to do that. But as a challenge for you, I also want you to now think about independently the connotations of the word primitive. So we did primitive last week. So if you need to, go back to last week's lesson to remind yourself of what primitive means and perhaps some of the connotations of that. And complete the connotation part of the table. So press pause and then press play when you are ready. And green pens up then, please. And here we go then. So we have the doll, the connotations, the lack of autonomy, the fact that the doll is disposable. Now, hopefully none of you wrote play or fun in there, because we know that doesn't link to war, and the connotation must be telling us something connecting war with the experience of a soldier. For primitive, we have the connotation then of savagery. Okay, so something uncivilized, ferocious, brutal, some form of regression perhaps, potentially, you might have talked about linking to last week's lesson. So again, if you need to, press pause, complete that rest of that table or add to your ideas, and then press play when you're ready to move on. So you can probably guess the next stage then. The next stage is to think about the effect on the reader. Okay, so we know a doll has connotations of a lack of autonomy. So how does that link to the experience of a soldier? What does it suggest to us about the experience of a soldier? So can you please have a go at filling out that part of the table and the one about the word primitive? Press pause and press play when you're ready. And green pens at the ready then, please. Here are my answers then. So a doll, what does that doll, the connotations of doll suggest to the reader? Well, that war is very disempowering. Soldiers don't really have control or ownership over their own lives. They are controlled by a greater force, by lots of different greater forces, like I explained earlier. Primitive, well, what does that suggest about the experience of a soldier? That it's really brutal and it's senseless and it is uncivilized, okay? Going over the top, that experience of war is not nice. It is savage, senseless, uncivilized and brutal. So again, pause the video if you need to add to your ideas, and then we'll get ready to write this up into a full paragraph. So we have everything we need now, don't we? We have our point at the top, we have our quotation here, and we have our analysis of the language down here. So that's everything we need now to write our paragraph. Now, I'm going to, in a moment, I'm going to put up a writing frame. However, if you're feeling really confident, you can pause the video now and you can try it without that writing frame. However, if you don't want to and you would like the writing frame to support you, then I'm going to flash it up now. Here we go then. So I'd like the full paragraph written out, please. Press pause as you do that and then press play, and we'll go through a possible answer afterwards. Okay, well done. Some great work there, I am sure. So can you now get your green pens out? And here is my answer. What I would like you to do is pause the video, read through my answer by yourself and add anything in green that you think that you have missed. Really fantastic work, everyone. Well done. We have now completed that fourth step, haven't we? We've explained how those striking, significant language choices created that overall impression of the experiences of soldiers. What I would like you to do now is to complete your exit ticket, which is underneath. And of course, don't forget to upload examples of your brilliant work to Padlet. I will be reading them or looking forward to reading them and show calling some next week. So well done, and I will see you next week.